So without further ado, let me pass over to Amir. And Amir, do you want to take us back over the last couple of months of what US travelers are thinking and what are they doing in terms of their travel intentions?
Sure thing, Chris. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, as you said, wherever you are today. It's a pleasure being back, and it's been a very interesting couple of months for us all. It's an understatement, but as far as the data goes, we definitely have learned a number of things. Quick refresher, our travel sentiment study that we conduct every week, taking a pulse check of American travelers. It comes out of our Travel USA panel. Travel USA, the largest and longest ongoing study of traveling American households. Rather than looking back at their recent travels, we're talking to them about their sentiments about travel moving forward here. So we started this at the beginning of the crisis hitting our US shores back in early March and right before things started shutting down, and we've been trying to bring this as a tool to everyone. And really want to thank Miles for this partnership, their support in this program, because we're able to provide this at no charge to the entire industry. So thank you, Chris and team at Miles. So this past week, as usual, we talked to 1,000 adults 18 years and older, and here are some of our key learnings here. We'll get the clicker here moving. Oh, there it is. Let's go back one. There we are. Okay, sorry about that. Well, this past week, we found out that 79% of travelers planning to travel in the next 6 months have either changed or in the process of changing their, or will be changing their travel plans. Almost half of them canceled their trip completely. Almost half of them have reduced their travel plans in some form or fashion, going from long vacations to a series of getaways, or even more significantly, I think a lot of people on this call, about 1 in 4 changing from a long-haul fly destination to a drive destination in there, and of course the cancellations and changing of international travel plans to domestic travel plans. At this point, when we look over the trend line here, pretty confident to say that anybody who had travel plans in the next 6 months was impacted by them has already kind of made that decision one way or the other. Not a lot of undecided left in initial travel plans there. You can see that we've held pretty steady the last couple of weeks here. There's always a plus or minus 2% kind of margin of error there. So it's pretty flat over the last couple of weeks. And you can see we still have a long way to get back down to that 58% the first week we got there. Now, as we look at the trend lines and the other factors here of how they're changing their travel plans, again, you see stabilization in those who are canceling their travel, those who reduced their travel. I think the most significant thing to look at here is on the changing to road trip, drive market travel. As you can see, that's been inching its way up here over the last few weeks. There, and you can see the beginning of the survey, that was, we saw that was the initial plan was, okay, fine, I'm going to just take a road trip instead of flying somewhere and do sort of, and you saw a lot of trips being changed to drive markets, and then of course you saw everything going to lockdown, a lot of trips being canceled, and now that we're entering reopening or partial reopening, people looking forward again, and you're starting to see that drive market interest again. Every week we are asking folks about the key, what factors will greatly impact their decision to travel in the next 6 months. The 3 factors we've been measuring each and every week have been transportation costs, concerns about the economy, and of course the fear of the coronavirus. They pretty much stayed in this order in terms of throughout the whole survey. Transportation costs being not much of an issue at all, concerns with the economy being steady, we'll talk about that in a moment, and of course the 500-pound gorilla in the room has been the fear of coronavirus. There, as you can see, 55% of travelers telling us that they will be greatly impacting their decision to travel. Add that with those who scored a 4 out of 5, and you're looking at about 78% of influence there. The interesting thing here, and here's a bright spot for everybody, focus in on this. As you can see, we kind of peaked about April 1st. We peaked at 67% of folks saying it would greatly impact their decision to travel in the next 6 months, and lo and behold, we're back down to 55%. So in the past month, we've seen that sentiment steadily inching downwards in the right direction. Now, Still have a long way to go. You can see on March 11th, it was 35% only, but we like the direction it's heading in, and fingers crossed, we see it going that way. All right, talked about the economy. This is the one that's probably surprised most people the most when they look at these factors. As obviously we know that the economy sunk into a deep recession due to everything coming to a stop for so long. There were a lot of folks just thinking, and we were part of that group initially, that concerns about the economy, as fears of the coronavirus would ebb, the concern about the economy would go up, and really hasn't. It stayed the same. It tells us a couple things here that are most likely happening. Number one, still the fear of the coronavirus is so great, people are getting beyond that. And secondly, if there's that pent-up demand, people want to get away. So they're saying, I'm going to get away somehow when I can. They're not so concerned about what type of expense because they haven't gotten into that deep planning yet. Now, the $64,000 question we always look at, are you planning to travel in the next 6 months? Back in March 11th, you saw 87%, almost everyone was, yeah, we're going to be traveling. It's, yeah, the coronavirus thing's coming, but we're still going to be traveling. We'll be at it in no time. There, as you can see, we bottomed out on April 1st. And then the first 2 weeks in April, we were getting excited because we saw a directional move and back up the right way. And then it held steady. And so you can see for pretty much the past month, we've been floating right around 70% in terms of intent to travel in the next 6 months. So what's that telling us? Well, this is kind of unprecedented territory, uncharted waters. You've heard that a lot about the virus, unprecedented territory, right? Well, here's what's happened. There's this bubble of pent-up demand, right? This big ball of pent-up demand. In past crises, recessions, and so forth, it gets released when the time's right, when the economy starts looking like it's improving, or post 9/11, it was shortly thereafter, and releases and start going back up. Unfortunately, this big ball of pent-up demand is now running straight into a wall of fear, consumer fear of coronavirus in there. If you just listen to the news every day, while you're hearing on the one hand talk about reopening economies and the gradual return to some type of new normalcy, at the same time you're hearing all the debate about reopening too soon and talk of fear of a second surge and what that means, and of course and all the debates around that. And that's quite frankly what we're seeing right here. Every week at the end of our survey, we save last question for kind of a wild card question, as we call it internally. We've asked different questions over the last 2 months over travelers' media consumption, when do travelers feel it's safe to travel, and so forth. This week, we felt it was time to ask that question of, when it's okay to travel, what is that first trip you're planning to take in the next 6 months? That very first trip you're planning to take. And as you can see, it's visiting friends and relatives. Well, again, we've been very disconnected as a society, right? We've maybe missed family gatherings and friends gatherings over Easter, spring break, Mother's Day coming up this weekend here in the US. So don't forget to call your mom. And people they just want to reconnect with their loved ones, the people most important to them, see their grandchildren, see whoever they can visit, college buddies, etc. And guess what? They're going to do it by car. As you can see, almost the same amount said we're going to do a short driving trip, and some said we're going to take a longer driving trip. But guess what? We're taking a road trip. You can see big drop off when we're talking about air travel in there. What's the second greatest group? Well, a leisure trip, just getting away. I got to get away for myself, my spouse, family, and so forth in there. And again, what are they going to do? They're going to take a road trip. I think one of the most encouraging things that you see here, one of the brightest spots, is you go down to where it shows 8% there, for about 4 from the bottom. Only 8% of American travelers are telling us that they're not planning to take a trip in the next 6 months. So that intent to travel is high, and they're getting ready to go as soon as they can go. And as long as that number stays in single digits, I'm going to be smiling. That's my story, Chris. I'm sticking to it. Over to you.
Yeah, I mean, actually, some of the stats out of China, Amir, this last weekend, I believe it was a long weekend in China, they were seeing record domestic visitor numbers, and they've in fact seen crowding at some of the key places, which of course is not ideal when they're trying to maintain social distancing. So pent-up demand is absolutely a real thing when it's appropriate to travel. We've summarized practical takeaways in our blog that will be posted this afternoon. It will be included in the email. And just to clarify to everybody, the slides, the recordings, and resources are all going to be sent out via an email 24 hours after this webinar. So, and you can also share that recording with other people. So this blog really summarized these 6 practical takeaways. The opportunity, obviously, to stay connected with future travelers, that pent-up demand is real, and to inspire them, but really focusing and prioritizing the essentials of connecting with locals and supporting local business. We all know how challenged businesses are. So if you're a destination, how do you support them? How do you activate your locals to support them? And then this whole critical issue of visiting friends and relatives. How do you use your locals to activate visiting friends and relatives to maximize their stay and spend? And just remember, VFR doesn't mean that they're going to stay at their friends and relatives. In fact, about 30 to 40% of VFR travelers have traditionally stayed in commercial accommodation. So with all the work that's being done around hygiene and cleaning, etc., that's an opportunity, obviously, to involve your commercial accommodation as well. People are very focused around official advice, particularly federal agencies such as the CDC. In terms of telling them when and how it's appropriate to travel. And then finally, storytelling, content, delivering that message needs to be across multiple media, including print showed up as a strong channel that people wanted to engage with. I think with all the screens we're interacting with, print, that sort of tactile experience seems very comforting and familiar at these times.